हाँ, फोन किया था तुमने। हाँ, तुम्हारा आ गया था। मैं तो, ये 7 बजे शुरू होगा, 5 मिनट पहले करो। और 10 मिनट कर लो, क्योंकि डॉक्टर रजा भी आके शायद चले गए। है ना? तो हाँ, ठीक है, ठीक है, ठीक है, नो प्रॉब्लम। ओके, ओके। हाँ, 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 ठीक है, ठीक है। तो मतलब ऐसा ऐसा नहीं है कि वो पब्लिक में डिस्कस करें, अपना आपस में करना। हाँ, हाँ, या। हाँ, अब नहीं, नहीं, ये तो ओपन हो गया है। वो तो ये रोक नहीं सकते ना किसी को हम। हाँ, हाँ, तो अब कोई आ रहा है तो उसको मना थोड़ी कर देंगे। पता नहीं कौन आ रहा है, किस। एनीवे, नो प्रॉब्लम। कुछ बात उनसे करनी है तो फोन पे करो। बस ये चीज बता देना कि ये चीज एडिशन हुई है कि 5 क्वेश्चन आंसर होंगे। अच्छा, ठीक है, ठीक है। डॉक्टर चैटर्जी अभी आएंगे, उनको भी बोल देना फिर। तो तुम्हारी उनसे है मुलाकात? फिजिकली नहीं, मतलब नाम से तो जानते हो। हाँ, हाँ, ठीक है, चलो, चलो, ओके, ओके। चलो, ठीक है। चलो, ठीक है, ठीक है, ओके, ओके।
मैंने उनको नंदिनी को ना ईमेल भेज दिया है।
अच्छा ठीक है ठीक है। तुम्हें मैंने अभी फिलहाल को होस्ट बनाया है, जब
एक
किसी
मिनट
और
रुकिए
का
थोड़ा, मैं
नंबर।
हाँ मैं उनको जरा आर्टेमिस एरीज को करवा के आऊँ।
अच्छा ठीक है ओके।
मैंने उनको नंदिनी को
हाँ ठीक है
ईमेल
ठीक
भेज दिया है।
है। अच्छा ठीक है। तुम्हें मैंने अभी फिलहाल को होस्ट बनाया है, जब किसी और का नंबर।
हाँ मैं
ओके ओके।
हेलो।
ये आधा बढ़ जाए, मैं बस पता कर रहा था कि आप रेडी हैं ना।
जी जी मैं रेडी।
ओ अच्छा, हम ठीक 7 बजे शुरू करेंगे जी।
ठीक है।
ओके ओके, फिर आप।
चलिए, मैंने एक्चुअली लोकेशन चेंज किया क्योंकि वहां शोर बहुत था।
अच्छा अच्छा। अच्छा, तुम्हें वो मेल मिल गई ना, व्हाट्सएप डॉक्टर इखलाक की? Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
How are you?
Thank you. How are you?
I am fine.
Now they start the program, eh?
Yeah, in another 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Wait.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hello, professors.
Hello, Dr. Chatterjee. Nice to meet you here.
I'm here.
Adab Mukhia, Professor Mukhia.
जी आदाब आदाब राना बीबी कैसे हैं
जी सब अल्लाह का शुक्र. So nice to see you here.
जी हाँ
Hello, Professor Mukhia.
आजकल इसी तरह से मुलाकातें हुआ करती हैं ऑनलाइन
Dandri, I just messaged you after Professor Rizavi sums up your talk. We'll have 5 question and answers.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. I'll be guided by you. So when I get the cue from you, I'll start, and it's about 45 minutes. Is that right?
Yes.
Sure. And some friends were asking, so it's going live on YouTube. Is that right?
Yes.
Thank you.
Suhail bhai, it's going live on YouTube, na? Muted है.
Yeah, I have tested it. It's on live on YouTube.
All right. I need to share my screen. Is that possible?
Yeah, it is possible. You are already a co-host now.
Okay, thank you. So should I try it now, or
Yeah, you
I'll
can try it. Let me stop share my screen.
Okay, thank you.
Now you can do it.
All right, thank you, sir. Right, so it's just a PowerPoint that I want to show. Just one sec.
Yeah.
Is it visible?
Yes.
All right, okay. I'll just change one slide to show. Yes, everything's visible, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'll stop sharing.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम सुहेल भाई.
वालेकुम सलाम. जी, काफी लोग इकट्ठे हो गए. अभी 4-5 मिनट का टाइम है, तो ठीक वक्त.
आदाब सोहेल साहब.
आदाब प्रोफेसर आजवी. डॉक्टर चंद्रशेखर भी ज्वाइन हो चुके हैं.
Should we start at 7 or wait for 5 minutes for others?
I think wait for 5 minutes so that everyone joins.
Okay. I'll just post it once more.
ये क्या आ गया?
अच्छी बात है। जी जी, मैं देख रहा हूँ। ओके।
Suhail bhai, where's Bhabhi?
आ रही हैं, एक मिनट।
Hello, brother.
हाँ, ओके। आ रही हैं, आ रही हैं।
So we are just waiting for Professor Bilqis Hussaini to join us and we'll start.
Okay.
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
वालेकुम सलाम। स्टार्ट कर सकते हो, डॉक्टर सैनी ने ज्वाइन कर लिया।
Okay. Good evening, everybody. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to the 6th Professor Abdi Memorial Lecture today. It is to be given by Dr. Nandini Chatterjee of Exeter University. And what is very interesting is that this lecture is something that was very close to Professor Abidi's heart, because from what I remember and what I have been talking to Mr. Suhail Abdi about is Professor Abdi's passionate search for documents. And I remember this being talked about often, how he would, go to small towns, villages, kasbas, and try and locate places where he thought there would be archival material, because as we all know, a lot of Persian archival material was dispersed and some of it is still there in close family holding. So he would try and convince them to give them to libraries or in a place where they could be read and discussed. So it's a great pleasure, Dr. Nandini Chatterjee, to welcome you to this lecture. I welcome Professor Ali Nadeem Rizavi, who is the chair for the evening, Professor Bilqis Hussaini, who is the secretary of the association, Dr. Muhammad Ali Rabbani, the cultural counselor of Iran Culture House, New Delhi. A very warm welcome to you, and a very warm welcome to Dr. Khaja Piri, director Noor Microfilm Center, Mr. Shahid Mehdi, who is the president of the society. I welcome Professor Eaton and Professor Harbans Mukhia for having taken out time from their busy schedule to come and attend this lecture. And everybody, all of you who are here, a very, very warm welcome. I now invite Professor Bilqis Hussaini to introduce the society's recent activities.
आवाज आ रही है?
जी. With the permission of the president.
अगर वो मीटिंग शुरू हो गई हमारी।
मीटिंग शुरू हो गई है, वो पता नहीं कहाँ फोटो गायब हो गई। एक मिनट, आदाब है आप सब लोगों के लिए।
ओके।
With the permission of the
आप
President
ज्वाइन
of
कीजिए, नो प्रॉब्लम. ओके.
the permission of the President of Sayyid Amir Hassan Abidi Memorial Society, Dr. Sayyid Shahid Mehdi साहब, आदाब अर्ज़ है आप सब लोगों के लिए. Dear Professor Nadeem Rizvi, Dr. Nandita Chatterjee, Dr. Ali Rabbani, the Counselor of Iran Culture House, and Mr. Khaja Piri, the Director of Noor Microfilm Center, other colleagues and scholars, I welcome you all. Professor Amir Hassan Abidi Memorial Society was registered in the year 2016. Professor Abidi was a devoted scholar of Persian language and literature in the University of Delhi. He introduced the Persian world the importance of Indo-Persian literature. We have organized 5 lectures and 1 webinar on 27th February 2021 to commemorate the centenary of Professor Abidi's birth in association with Department of Persian of the University of Delhi. The details are on our website www.professorabidimemorial.com. The 3 postgraduate students have been awarded a scholarship in the past, and it is continuing also. And we have published 2 volumes of Indo-Persian literature, the collection of Professor Abidi's articles, and the 3rd one is also in progress. We hope, with the help of members and well-wishers, to keep alive the heritage of Professor Abidi. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Professor Hussaini. I now invite Professor Chandrasekhar, who is the Vice President of the Society, to welcome all the distinguished guests and give a brief introduction of the event and to introduce the speaker and the chair. Professor, you are on mute. Professor Chandrasekhar, please unmute.
I hope I am.
Yes, yes.
Good evening to everyone present on this platform for a very important lecture, as Madam Hussaini has given the description. We welcome 2 renowned scholars here, especially Professor Mukhia, Professor Eaton, Professor Nadeem Rizvi. It is also notable that Professor Nadeem Rizvi, who is chairing this session, his guru, Professor Irfan Habib, has earlier chaired these lectures. So it is another chain of the honor for this Professor Abdi Memorial Society, that one after another we are getting this kind of a privilege. Professor Rabbani, who is a cultural counselor in Iran Culture House, New Delhi, from the time of his joining, almost now 2 years, are continuing the academic production of the different works and also making some prominent issues relating to Persian also. And I used to join different online activities of that culture house. Dr. Khaja Piri is a collector of variety of the artifacts from stone to paper. One can see not only the manuscripts, but also a variety of the other, even those from the historical buildings, the material he has brought and placed in Noor microfilm, including the old astrolabes, which are not available in many sections. though I cannot see Dr. Khaja Piri here, but I hope someone may be representing Noor Microfilm Center. And it is also important to mention that he has got almost every piece from National Archives as in the digital form in the Noor Microfilm Center, including the whole collection of Inayat Jung collection from National Archives there. That is amounting about 1,43,000 documents, some of which Nandini had also read, and we got some digital copies of that. Our Honorable President, Dr. Shahid Mehdi Sahib, I wish him all health, good health to him. I hope he will be joining us very soon, as I could heard from Suhail Bhai. And under his patronage, the society is moving ahead. And every year we are having this kind of academic lectures, which are being heard throughout the world, as we can see on this platform today also. Nandini, a renowned scholar in the field of archival documents, not only sitting the archives, going to the place of the origin of the documents, as the one book she published on which she has been given an award from United States also. The whole book covers from Jahangir period till present time of one family from Dhar Malwa to Jaipur, the person who has the genealogical table even. Very rarely we find such a chain of the documents from one family. In politics, one family may not be ruling more than 60 years, 70 years, or even 100 years. But in this administrative setup from the early Mughal period till late British rule, the same family continued to rule in the same place. Nandini found out that. Going from place to place, getting out the documents. In fact, I am obliged to her to put me in this field to read the documents, to read more and more and to refresh my own knowledge of SIAC system. I will not take more time, but I know that she has not picked up only Persian or earlier Hindi or Urdu. She has picked up very good Arabic also. For research, we need the passion, not the money alone. Definitely money allows it. She got a European Union good funding for the project. But many of us do get the projects, but the completion of the project is more important, and it's in a fruitful way in which she has done it. And I also congratulate her to get the professorship very recently in Exeter University on the basis of her research production. I wish her more elevations, and not taking more time, again, we welcome to all, especially our very senior teachers like Professor Mukhia, Professor Richard Eaton, as well as Professor Nadeem Rizvi, who is not only working on the Mughal architecture, especially his book on Fatehpur Sikri, is a bright lamp on the various ethos and the aspects of the architecture. Fortunately, about 5 months back, I got his book again to read certain aspects on the how the stone cutters were using that, or the maps which he has given. I invite Dr. Nandini Chatterjee to this lecture to enhance knowledge of us in this special area of source for the historical studies. Dr. Nandini Chatterjee. rather Professor Nandini Chatterjee.
With the permission of the chair, I'd like to begin then with greetings to all of you distinguished guests here present in the Zoom room, as well as online. Dear Madam Rana Safvi, Dr. Hussaini, my great guru, Professor Chandrasekhar, Professor Rizavi, members of Professor Abdi's family, and all the other distinguished teachers in this room. I thank you for the enormous honor that you have given me by inviting me to deliver the 6th Professor Abdi Memorial Lecture. I am only a beginner in the study of Persian, of course. Your kindest teachers always make it sound much better than you are, and I rely on your kindness in listening to my lecture. It is your generosity, many of yours generosity individually, again, but also collectively, that has allowed me to conduct my research using some very small scraps of paper written in Persian and in other languages, and to present my even smaller findings in front of an audience worldwide and several audiences, including this one. So thank you very much also to the entire audience that has tuned in to a talk which is not going to be about poetry, spirituality, or even glamour, power, or war, but about the everyday life of some ordinary people in the Mughal Empire. With your permission, I will share my screen because there are certain things that I need to show in order to illustrate my lecture. And if you could kindly confirm that you can see my screen, that would be great.
Yes, it's visible.
Thank you, Madam Safi. Thank you very much. I'm not going to open it up to discussion yet, but I thought I would lead with this picture. And I wonder where people think this picture is from. It does represent the Haveli, if you like, of a family of Zamindars, which I'm going to talk about as well. But I wonder where people think this is from. Would somebody in this room like to suggest? If you'd like to unmute and suggest.
Is it that from the family of the Chaudhrys of Dhar?
Thank you, Professor Chandrasekhar. And I was also wondering if Madam Safi might know, as a real expert in regional architectures. But I'll not push you and put you on the spot. My point really was, it is not, Professor Chandrasekhar. It is actually a Zamindar Haveli from Bikrampur, which is near Dhaka. My point really in asking you that question is that there is a kind of similarity about these kind of Zamindari establishments, which once were under the Mughal Empire. Of course, in a Bengali Zamindari Haveli, you have these kinds of Venetian blinds, which are kind of giveaway. But still, there is a kind of image of the Zamindari and as it used to be. And that is why I chose to lead with this image. But let us come to Persian. Now, there's nobody in this audience to whom I need to explain why Persian is so important for the study of Mughal history. And this image you would have seen many times, but I thought I would lead with this lovely picture of a slightly chubby Abul Fazl presenting a copy of the Akbarnama to Akbar. And this is from the Victoria and Albert Memorial, the V&A Museum in London. However, my paper is not going to be about such elevated works of literature, history, philosophy, art, etc. It's about Persian and its use for more practical purposes. So even while sticking to the quotes for a little time, I thought it would be useful to actually present you with this image, which is lovely for a number of reasons. The image is from a manuscript which is currently at the Musée Guimet in Paris, and it is reproduced in John Sellers' edited publication of the Hamzanama. But what it actually shows is an Iranian artist, Mir Musawir, who was invited by Humayun to come and join his court, but he was late. His son came to the court first, and then the son arranged an arzadash, a petition, to be presented to the emperor, in which Mir Musawir apologized for his delay and said that he was going to join later. So there's debate about who is actually depicted in this picture, and it's probably one of the courtiers who presented this petition, the arzadash, to the emperor. But what is really lovely about this painting is that not only does it show you that moment of presenting an arzadash, it actually reproduces the arzadash itself. The point I want to make is that while I do start, and I will talk a lot about getting away from the Mughal courts, away from the rich and powerful, actually a consciousness of documents, I feel, actually pervades the entirety of Mughal culture. So right up to courtly painting, you have this constant inclusion of written text and especially documents in various Mughal chronicles, but also even in the painting. Okay, coming to Persian far beyond the courts and the kind of material that, with your grace, which I'll discuss in detail, I have learned to use a little. So the kind of material that I use is more often like this, which is a kind of receipt. I could call it a sale deed, but for those of you who can see, it is a bilingual receipt, really, of 13 rupees being received by two men called Nathu and Makbul, who had built a house on the land owned by a Thakur, the Thakur's family on whom I did my research. And having received that money on selling the house, they write this receipt. And it is, and I will discuss the features of this later on, but I just wanted to start with a visual material that I going to talk about. Okay. Now, of course, you also know, and this is no relevance to the paper as such, but I really couldn't help throwing in the fact that, of course, when we actually speak about Persian, we actually talk about New Persian, what is known as New Persian, which is written in the modified Arabic script. Of course, Persian is much older than that. And of course, Persian was written in many different scripts. And in this beautiful Zoroastrian manuscript, actually, we have a beautiful instance of Persian written in three scripts, the Avestan, the Pahlavi, and the Arabic derived script. With more than that, there's actually upside down in Sanskrit as well. This is only to say that actually, when we talk about Indo-Persian, we perhaps need to also put it in the context of the wider Persianate world. That is, in using Persian as a language of culture, of literary production, of administration, and of legal contracting, the Mughals were, of course, not alone. And especially in using it as a foreign language, the Mughals were not alone. So there is what's called the Bengal to Bosnia complex, which in this huge zone between the 9th and the 19th century, but variably, people have not always been able to speak in Persian, but they have used Persian for a variety of reasons. And I created this little map with bubbles to kind of try and map for my own purposes how people were actually using Persian only for writing in this vast part of Eurasia. So the red bubbles on this map indicate those places where Persian was used for administrative and legal documentation, as well as literary production. As I studied more, and there's a lot of literature on this, I found that actually the Ottoman Empire was highly Persianate as well, and we have Persian Sufi texts from as far as Bosnia. But this you already know, perhaps many of you in the audience. However, we also have Persian documentation available from the northern Indian Ocean and the Gulf states, and there is actually, where there is no dense Persian literary production, on the other hand, that documenting practice in Persian sort of fades away as we move down the southern Mediterranean as in the north of Africa, as well as the east. So you have this huge zone in which many people could never speak Persian particularly well, but they used Persian very often and for a variety of reasons in this huge time period. Of course, it's Michael Hodgson who coined the term Persianate to think of that context. And of course, Professor Eaton's book about India in the Persianate age is only part of this, well, I won't say huge yet, but certainly growing volume of production on the Persianate world that has started, say, about in the last 10 years. So we are part of that story. We may be talking of little scrappy documents from somewhere in central India, but we are still talking about that huge world in which those very documents, in whole or in part, would actually be recognizable no matter where you were located, whether you were located in central India or whether you were actually located in Western India. Okay, as Professor Chandrasekhar so kindly mentioned, I got the opportunity to study this alongside a number of extremely talented colleagues, both my senior in career as well as younger than me, in this project, which we call the Forms of Law in the Early Modern Persianate World. And in this, we divided it up into five sub-language zones: Persian in combination with Hindi, Persian in combination with Bengali. And by the way, by Hindi, we mean Hindustani, as well as Old Hindui. Persian in combination with Rajasthani, with Marathi, and with Arabic. So the results of this are coming out in publication right now. And actually, in the coming week, we should have a new volume of the Journal of Economic and Social History of the Orient, which is about business documentation in Persian. But the main output that I wish to talk to you about is this book called Negotiating Mughal Law, a family of landlords across 3 Indian empires. Now, the 3 Indian empires are actually that of the Mughals, the Marathas, and then the British. And I tried to show, as in this book, by tracing the fortunes of this Zamindari family, how this family managed to survive not only these regime changes, but actually continued in place until very recently in the small town of Dhar, currently in Madhya Pradesh. This book is open access and free to download for anyone who'd like to look at it and look at the story a little bit more closely. Okay. But what were my research questions? Let's try and get into the why of it. I was interested in law and society, especially in multi-religious societies. I started off my academic career as a modernist, and I wrote a book on law and empire in British colonial India, and I wrote about the minority community of Christians. And I was really interested to see how a minority can actually shape wider political and legal culture. And my argument was that they were able to do so because they made people uncomfortable. I think there are broader points here, which I will not explore for you, but my point was that people who don't fit in, people who are different, force the wider society to contend with them. And that is why my book was actually called The Making of Indian Secularism. However, I remained unsatisfied because I was curious about the situation in Mughal India. What happened before the British colonial rulers came and brought their own ideas and also created these massive archives? Apart from the early days of Islam, of course, the Mughal Empire, as we all know, was distinctive for its majority population of non-Muslims. So surely these questions must have come up not only in the sensational political issues, which we seem to only focus on, which can be temple destruction or the poll tax jizya. I'm also interested in them. I was really interested in everyday questions, as in, how do you buy land? How do you register it? How do you sell a house, or how do you buy a house? If you fall out over with your family members over an inheritance dispute, how do you resolve it? And what happens if the parties in that dispute happen to be of different religions? Can we actually form a sense of what did people understand by law? What did people think was the right thing? What was justice in the Mughal period? I admit, and I think I've made it clear already, that I don't find the rich and powerful particularly interesting, especially since so much of our history ends up being the history of great men, so that we write the histories of single families and then propose these to be the histories of the entire countries. There is great value in that, but for me, I wasn't particularly interested in that. I was interested in history from below. And in a past talk, I have mentioned that I was inspired by the English social historians such as E.P. Thompson, who made the middling sorts, the everyday sorts of people like the pub owners, the school teachers, the traders, that come alive as real people. Now, I have a huge debt, obviously, to the great tradition of Indian social history, both Marxist and beyond. So the work that in doing this kind of detailed work, it would have been impossible had the work, especially from the Aligarh school, not been available already. And I'll point out my very specific debts at points. But reading that work, of which, of course, the greatest stalwart is Professor Habib himself, I learned so much. I learned about state structures. I learned about changes in state structures during moments of crisis. I learned about village and urban economies, about social hierarchies, about trade and trade patterns. But, and this is why you, of course, do research, it's because something remains unanswered for you. And you want to know, and you're excited about something, and you begin to love a world that you find out about, but you want to know, yes, but what about these other people? So for me, what was missing was the stories of the common people, and by which I mean not the social hierarchy patterns, the caste patterns, the employment patterns. I wanted names. I wanted names and stories and personalities and disputes, because my question was, do only princes and princesses and kings and sheikhs, do only they have stories? Does nobody else have stories? Don't we have stories today? Because we are not kings and queens and princesses. So don't we deserve a story? Now, I will step back from a moment from this kind of girlish excitement, if you like, about the storytelling, and also point towards my other inspiration, which is Carlo Ginzburg at all times. Microhistory is my passion, but microhistory, as I've said in a past lecture, and I'm ashamed to be repeating some of this to those who have heard it, but I think it bears repeating. Microhistory is not studying little things for the sake of it. It's not as if the whole thing is already known and we are filling in colors or little patterns. Microhistory is like zooming in with a camera. So if you actually look at your own hand, it looks a certain way if you use your bare eyes. But if you put your skin cells under a microscope, then a very different world opens up altogether. It isn't as if it was already there. It was not even visible. It's a different world altogether. The subatomic world is a different world. The subcellular world is a different world. My point is that if you zoom in, then historical methodology has shown that we actually find out things about how things were really done. As in, how did people actually get appointed to certain posts? How did people actually stand surety for each other? How did they undercut each other? How did they build up their, if you like, their little Raj in their little villages, little districts, all while the Mughal Empire stretched above? And most importantly, how did they use the institutions of the state in order to do that? It's called state capture in modern times, that you actually use state-given licenses, you use state structures, the police. It has been going on for a very, very long time, actually. Okay, and the final point is about the archival turn. I wasn't happy to simply accept the story that the Mughal archives have been lost. Neither was I happy to simply accept the idea that the Mughal archives, had it existed, would be exactly the same as the colonial archives, which is basically a continuous series of documentation produced by different state departments, which is stored in a particular building and is intended to be retrieved. Actually, if we look across the Islamic world, if we leave the Ottomans apart, because they are the exception rather than the rule, we find that a lot of regimes did not think it necessary to save their documents. The Mamluks clearly discarded their documents. There's really good work on the Fatimids that's come out with Marina Rosto's work, where actually really important royal orders were simply scrapped, and then people recycled that paper. Actually, Jewish merchants did that, and having written their contracts on the reverse, they threw it into the Geniza, which, if you think, is like a dustbin. And that's how we actually found it. What I'm trying to actually say is that when we think about archives and when to find the archives, we really have to think a little bit creatively and not just completely think all the time with our colonial and post-colonial mindset that it's going to be something like the National Archives of India, because it isn't going. The parallel I love to give on this is that of medical records. There's so much of medical documentation. All of you, I've no doubt, have stashes of medical documentation. But in India, there is no central record of your medical records, is there? Every time you go to a doctor, you bring your file out to actually show the doctors all your past x-rays, all your past blood tests, all the prescriptions. It's your responsibility to keep the papers. You are the archivist of your medical records. Why would we imagine that other records would be archived any differently? So the argument I try to make in the book, but let me show you something first and then I'll come there. I'll show you what I went looking for when I actually tried to answer these questions. I, of course, started with the idea that there's going to be that kind of central archives, because the only other Islamic regime about which we knew anything in terms of their archival collections was the Ottomans. And I thought the Ottomans have these lovely sigillat, which are these registers which summarize all documents. They chronologically record them. So surely the Mughals will have them somewhere. And for years, actually, I looked for the Mughal sigillat, and not a single one turned up. What did I find instead? What I found in the year after I started to learn Persian privately in Oxford, and that's in 2011. In 2012, I was actually fortunate to get a little grant to go to Delhi and start looking at the National Archives. I was also fortunate then to come across truly generous scholars, among them Professor Najaf Haidar and Professor Chandrasekhar. So when I found these documents, which made no sense to me at all, and I thought I had learned Persian. Persian, after all, is grammatically not very hard to read. I mean, in fact, for Bengalis, it's rather nice because there's no gender in the vowels, so we are very happy. So I thought, well, maybe I can do it, especially with short documents. And then I come across things like this, and I think, what on earth is this? So Professor Najaf Haidar suggested, why don't you go and talk to Professor Chandrasekhar, who was doing a free class. Well, he was doing a class for students in JNU, and I was the free entrant in that. And here I want to stop and salute not just the knowledge, but the generosity of a scholar like Professor Chandrasekhar. Because for a scholar like him to even take a look at a scrap like this, I haven't found that very common, because many Persian scholars look at this and find it simply ugly and irrelevant. It's not a beautiful manuscript. What's the point of looking at stuff like this? What will you learn out of this? Point one. Point two, your Persian is not good enough. If your Persian is not good enough, how do you expect you're going to ever read this? First, read a lot of Rumi, Hafiz, Bedil, Ghalib, then you can start reading this. But Professor Chandrasekhar said, that's not what you're going to do. You want to read these documents, so learn on the job. Actually, it became a joke between us that I trained myself to become like the semi-literate munshis who would have written these documents. I bet their Persian wasn't great, the ones in the villages. And I wanted to become like them because that's what I actually wanted to do. So I learned to read this kind of document, which, by the way, now I can look and even visually read as a Qawle-Qarar. It's a Qawle-Qarar document, which is a tax contract. In this case, the person is taking a patta of ijara as well of the Mauza of Mohanpur. And there's a 3-yearly arrangement, and you see that the 3 years are given in Hijri dates in the middle of the document. and there's a siyak value given for the payment in each of those years. What's really beautiful, and I will actually stop here a bit and point out some of the things that you need in order to actually read stuff like this. And that's part of the reading, is actually recognizing what it is. But the other thing to recognize is the form of letters. So very often we don't actually think that the Hindi part is going to be difficult to read. Actually, as you get used to this, you find that the Persian in such bilingual village level deeds is the easier, most standardized, clearer part. When you come to the Hindi, it looks really easy, but it's really, really hard. And this is the reason. If you read the first line of the Hindi, it is Kale Karar Pattaye Ijare Mauzaye Mohanpur Pargana Dhar Be Isme Parsottam Das. There is no, what is the Hindi in this? They have completely repeated what is there in the Persian, plus there is no separation of the words. On top of that, a lot of letter forms have changed. So the second letter, so the first letter is a Ka, the second letter is a La, that might be more recognizable to you. But the letter Ja is extremely different. And actually what it uses is a Marathi Ja. So if you actually go down to the bottom line, you see that I was not able to read the first, but I think Tariq or something like that. And then it's Tera, 13 of the Mah of Zika. So actually the date is written there as well. And in order to recognize it, you have to recognize the letter forms as well. As you can see, I delight in this. But let's go on to another challenge. The next point is, how does this make any sense? Okay, so somebody took a contract in order to pay a small amount of taxes as an ijaradar for a village for 3 years. Okay, so what does that tell us? Anything? We know that there were, although the court frowned on it, people did actually give out ijaras for tax collection. And here is one instance of it. Is that it? That wasn't very exciting to me. What was exciting is actually identifying the name Parsottam Das. And then as I looked through the catalogs of the acquired document series, and please do note what I'm saying, so it's in the National Archives, there are around 10,000 of these acquired documents, which are basically collections that were donated by individual families or bought from them, and then they were cataloged in this 6-volume catalog. Unfortunately, what happened in the process of that cataloging is catalogers treated all these documents like state documents, which they were in a way. But what they did was they took apart the integrity of the collections themselves. Say one comes from Madam Safvi's family, one comes from my family, one comes from Professor Chandrasekhar's family. They took it all together and they arranged them by date. So what happens then is that we completely lose sight of the people, the families who actually created these collections. So how do we put that back together? I like the term donkey method. You have to work hard sometimes. So what I simply did was I read the entire catalogs and I started making sense of what's going on. I saw the name Purushottam Das pop up again and again in around 100 documents. And as I started noting down this name and the documents in which Purushottam Das was mentioned, I began to find out everything about his family. I found out who his father was, who his uncle was, who his uncle's wife was, who his enemies were, who his ancestors were, who his children were. I really know this family extremely closely, better than my own family, as it happens. How did I do that? This is, I apologize to those who may be watching this on a small screen. Hopefully it is recorded, so you'll be able to see it later. But I'm trying to demonstrate one of my tools, which is a simple thing, which is an Excel spreadsheet. So what I started doing, and it took ages to do it, is write down the date of the document, convert it to the Gregorian year, and I'll talk about that in 1 minute, write a summary in which I was helped by the catalogs. By the way, here I again want to acknowledge my debt to the great archivist, Dr. Zakir Hussain, another AMU alumnus, whose catalogs made so much of this work possible. Then write down the details on the Zim, all the names that occurred, all the places that occurred, and other features of the document. Once you do that, you start seeing, okay, so he took a contract, and this must have been in his youth because his father was still working, because in the very next year, his father actually is getting a contract for that area. And for several years, his father and uncles work in the area. And finally, you come to a year in which you actually have a document saying, oh, because Chandrabhan has died, so all this is now given to Purushottam Das. You're actually beginning to create the family story. But let me take a diversion here and talk about dating. I said you date the documents. The easiest version is, of course, when you have one of those formal formats, if you like, in which post Jahangir, you have the genealogical seal, which really helpfully in the center gives you the Hijri date. Then it even gives you the regnal year. So you can convert the Hijri date, you can match it up with the regnal year, and hey, you have a more or less secure date on the document. More often, however, you might have something that you see on the right-hand side. This is also a very easy example. But here I had to apply a certain skill. Now here you do have the Hijri date, but in some cases you don't have the Hijri date, but you have some names. And this is what Professor Chandrasekhar taught me, and I learned more of later on, that you read Indian seals from bottom up, because actually the social hierarchy is represented in the seals as well. So in this case, in the black, we have Asad Khan, who is Banda, who calls himself Banda, Bande ye Badshah, and you have Alamgir and then Ghazi in the top line. So you not only do you read it upwards, you also get an indication. If you're lucky and they are a Mansabdar, then they'll say that they are Banda of the emperor, then you can get the regnal. I won't multiply examples, but in many cases, you won't have a Mansabdar. In some cases, you will have a lower official, and then they will call themselves, say, Bandae Asad Khan. And then you really have to be fortunate to actually know who Asad Khan was. And if they are more or less prominent in the area, then you're able to, again, date the document to some level of accuracy. Okay, now, because I want to talk of other things, I won't go into detail about how I actually did not stop at the National Archives, but I was convinced that there was more to the story. Following a footnote in Professor Irfan Habib's great book, The Agrarian Structure, I found around 60 documents, which were all parwanas, that is noble orders, which had been taken to Kuwait. And I got copies from the Dar al-Asar al-Islamia Museum in Kuwait, but still not being satisfied because I wanted to know what happened afterwards. I also went to Dhar just in case I found something. And I did. I actually, in a story that I've told in my book, I found the family. I spoke to the direct descendant of Purushottam Das, who I know is in the audience today. Thank you, Amit Chaudhary. And this is the family Haveli. And that is me actually photographing documents that were kept in boxes such as those by his now late mother under the bed in the family dwelling. What happened when I put that together? Because so long I've been talking about how things are difficult, but why would you do things like that? Number one, when I actually came to the family's own house and holdings, which they had thankfully created, I found the story that underlay that archives. I found materials such as this one, which is the Shajara, a family tree, which nobody would take, obviously. No museum would have taken, but the family had kept it. So as you see in old style shajaras, this is not a particularly pretty one, but it's still effective. You have the primal ancestor at the bottom, the first ancestor at the bottom. It's like a tree formation where actually the branches come out. And here I find the names that I had actually seen in the documents. Now I confirm what I suspected in many cases. I knew he had another brother. Well, the other brother turns up in the family document. Now, I I'll say that I'm not quite as credulous as that. If I had just found this, I wouldn't jump to a conclusion. But I had documents from 3 different archives, and then I had this material. Alongside, I also found accounts from the other side. Because when you actually look at legal documents, which includes both administrative, courtly documents, and also like kind of, if you like, Qazi court documents or deeds, it is a story from the official side. Now just think, you all must have title deeds. You all must have legal papers in your house. As we grow up, we accumulate these things. If somebody were to just look at those papers, how much would they know about you? Would they really know that you love flowers? Would they really know that you really value a connection with, say, Rajasthan, as this family did? So not only did I find English language petitions, but the family, which had survived in the area, had made to the British colonial administrator, which again gave the genealogy, but in a reduced form, getting rid of the unnecessary family members in the view of those petitions. I also found a Hindi language, what calls itself a Hakogal Nama. And it's really an account of the family's rights and how they came from Udaipur, how they settled in the area, how they did mezbani to an emperor, unnamed emperor who came to the area, how they settled, how they fell ill of the emperor, and then ultimately how they again flourished. So I actually had a family history, which once again is not necessarily true, but it shows me how the family actually chose to look upon itself. So one thing, for example, that I did not see in any of those documents were stories of violence, of valor, of satis, a lot of satis, none of which came up in the Persian documents. The family, although pious, and we cannot tell again from those documents really, clearly saw themselves something like martial Rajputs, because it is really that sanguinary glory that comes out in this family history. I also was able to extend the distribution of documents that I had by several years. And if you look at this distribution actually helped me also understand when people really get documents. The third stage of my research, that is from the family dwelling, is represented by the purple line. And this graph represents the total number of documents in any year. The purple line actually makes the year 1660 the year in which the maximum number of documents were produced. And if you take together with 1658 and 59, you find out that for obvious reasons, this landlord's family tended to get a lot of documents when a patriarch died, and the big blue line, a generational change happened. But the maximum documentation happened when a regime change happened, in the sense of Aurangzeb ascending the throne. I learned how this family actually told its story in legal documents as to how they had once defeated a highwayman and how that had led to grants. And once again, a very Rajput-like story of valor, bravery, and gaining of rights from exploits of the sword, although they got the position of Kanungo as well as Chaudhry. I learned many things about the use of languages, which is not just about the extension of Persian right down to the villages, but also the conjunction with other languages. We often think that in lower level documents, well, no Mughal Farman is in anything other than Persian, but we often think that lower level documents like sale deeds have another language element, say in Hindi. But have you ever seen this? On the left-hand side, you actually see a parwana by a Rajput noble called Amar Singh, and the whole parwana is actually in Persian, but his seal is in the Nagari script, and he calls himself Ram Upasak as well in the first Ram Upasak Chandravat Rao. So once again, language is used in combination for a number of reasons. We often very simplistically divide up language use by religion, as in Muslims use the Persian, Hindus use the Hindi. It's nothing of the kind. It's not as simple as that. Language does signal identity, as it is doing in this case, but it's not because this noble doesn't know Persian. It's because he chooses to represent himself through the Nagari. I also found documents from the Maratha period, which are fewer, but they are documents that show us that a Maratha regime, and this was the Pawar regime actually, which were Sardars who came in and then formed a state which became a British princely state. They didn't just always use Marathi. In many cases, the Maratha states of central India used a form of old Hindi, which is what we see here, but we also see a very lovely instance of typical Marathi documentation, which is the Muratab Shudh in the last line, which is validated. And I will finish with this story that I found. This story could have been a challenge as well. These were two documents that occurred in the collection that were already there in the National Archives. It was a mahzar in both cases, which is like an affidavit, a collective testimony, and it was sealed by a qazi. It's a nakal and it's sealed by a qazi. But it said that several qazis, muftis, muhtasibs were actually involved in this extremely trying case in the early 18th century, in which Hamid Chand, son of Purushottam Das, had a major claimant to the family's property and rights. And here comes the surprise. The claimant was called Muhammad Asad. How was that even possible? But once you actually read the mahzar in detail, it's completely possible because Muhammad Asad tells a story which would fit in perfectly with a Zamindar's lineage. It turns out that Purushottam Das's uncle, Suraj Khan, had married a woman from Luli, and I still remember when Professor Chandrasekhar identified this word for me called Parwar. And then apparently he had converted to Islam, and clearly the family had kicked them out. But Muhammad Asad didn't want to give up, and he wanted to claim his share as part of the family as well. I'll give away the sad ending of the story because it's a long one, which is fit for the films, really. Muhammad Asad lost. Everyone, Muslims and Hindus, as it says in the last bit of the document, agreed that Muhammad Asad had no claims on the family. So we have a proper tearjerker Bollywood possible here. It could have been a challenge. Actually, I will admit that in the beginning, I tried to sort of not hide, but not mention this document to the family members, who, as I have said, are caste Hindus. But then it couldn't be hidden because actually I was very fortunate to have Amit Chaudhary, who's the descendant of the family, working closely with me. And this is another of those generosities that has made this research possible. And there were documents even in the Dhar family household itself, which mentioned Muhammad Asad several times. And at some point, Amit asked me, surely this doesn't make sense. Why does Muhammad Asad turn up in our family? And that's when I said, I hope you don't mind, but actually there is this story about Muhammad Asad in your family. Do you mind me writing this in the book? And at that moment, I found a kindred soul. And please excuse my levity. Basically, Amit said, Yahoo, there's a Bollywood movie in there. I'm so happy that we have that path. And that was a great resolution because in many cases, in many families, that would have been an uncomfortable situation. But we actually were very delighted to see not only this document, but how it left traces across the family, where the family was clearly trying to get rid of this branch of the family because they were branches of the family. They were just of a different religion, and the rest just tried to get rid of them. Okay, so I'll sum up now here with an appeal. And just give me one sec. Professor Eaton wrote a very kind review of the book, and I'm so very grateful for his generosity. And Professor Eaton said, others need to take up this work because surely, however closely you do this work, it's not possible for one story to actually tell, to populate the underbelly of the Mughal Empire, as it were, single-handed. Surely not. So another aspect, or actually the whole aspect of the law forms project has been to look at several such collections, and in each one of them has really rich stories to go with it, such as the Valota Deshmukhs, who send me their papers, and it turns out that their family had got their rights because they had helped the Mughal noble Zulfikar Khan when he was actually taking action against Shivaji near Raigad. And that's where they actually got their lands from. So I will close by drawing attention to this web page, which I hope is visible. Is it visible? Is there a web page visible at this moment?
Yes, it is.
Okay, excellent. So this web page actually is a product of the project itself. This is the home page. And if you go to the documents, you find all the documents that we have managed to copy, provide an image of, but transcribe and also translate to the best of our ability. It allows you line numbers, and hopefully it's something useful for people. But if you wanted stories of this kind, you would go to these collections. And I mentioned some of the additional collections, of which, because Madam Safi is here, I will just point out one of the beginning ones that we have just started work on and are very proud is this collection donated, well, the image is donated to us by none less than Samir Hamdani from Srinagar. And we have at this moment one document from Srinagar in this collection. So this is an appeal for citizenship archiving, citizen-led archiving. I will stop sharing my screen now. And I want to just say that my project was an effort to bring Mughal history closer to us, making it more lively, more full of personalities that we can relate with, because I feel that Mughal history is very strangely distant from us. We talk of it as political issues. We talk of it as grandeur, but Mughal history is still all around, isn't it? It's still there even in our houses, perhaps today. Perhaps if we actually embrace these scrappy records, we paid attention to them, we were not afraid to share them, to work together with them, we can bring the Mughal Empire back into our knowledge and into our understanding, and perhaps even our hearts. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Chatterjee, for this very, very fascinating lecture. And I shall definitely go onto your website very soon. And this lecture will be put up on the website and on the YouTube channel, which you all can see and share later on. I now invite Professor Ali Nadeem Rezavi, the chair for the evening, to share his valuable input on the lecture.
Thank you very much, Nandini, for a brilliant, lecture. And you have exposed all of us to the various issues which are involved when one encounters an archive. But first of all, let me thank all the dignitaries who have joined today, Professor Hussaini, Professor Chandrasekhar, Shahid Mehdi Saab, Professor Sayyid, members of the Sayyid Amir Hassan Abdi Memorial Society, all of you who are there, Suhail Abdi Saab himself, Rana Safavi ma'am, both of whom provided me the chance to preside over such an illuminating talk on a topic on which much work actually is needed to be done. And of course, thank you, Nandini, for a very informative discourse. Having authored a book like Negotiating the Mughal Law, which, as Professor Chandrasekhar pointed out, won this year's prestigious Peter Gonville Stein Book Award, you were actually most suited to take up this topic. One of the first take from your talk today, as far as I am concerned, is that for a proper understanding of history from the perspective of the civic population, the subjects of an empire, and their negotiations with the state, the household archives and the archival material in the form of legal documents are very essential. I mean, that is one of the first takes from your talk. You not only told us about the various challenges which one faces in order to make sense of this kind of documentation, but also the various possibilities which ultimately open up for us if we take them into account. In fact, a history from below would only be possible if we actually access such archival resources. And I must congratulate you for pointing this out to us. The second take from your work, which you just presented, is that the last word on history of medieval India is yet to be reached, and that any meaningful research is only possible if, and only if, we master the language of our primary sources and documents. And by primary, the language of the primary sources, I do not only mean Persian, but also Rajasthani, Gujarati, and all the other languages in which these documents were actually written. Further, that good research is not possible if we do not hunt in the remotest corners for our sources and visit them literally to add to our knowledge. Only official chronicles and travel accounts can never be enough. As far as I'm concerned, your work, including your publications and of course your lecture today, add to the work already done on legal history and the understanding of legal system during the 17th and 18th centuries, which certain scholars nomenclate as part of the Persianate age. And I have Professor Eaton in mind. It also adds to our knowledge as far as interaction between Islam and Hinduism and the resultant Indian culture is concerned. In the last decades of the 20th century, attention was given by certain scholars to a study of archival materials like the legal documents, the hibanamas, baynamas, rahannamas, nikahnamas, etc., etc. I am, for example, reminded of my own set of papers based on the Surat, Cambay, and Ahmedabad documents in National Archives, New Delhi, which I wrote way back in 1980s. In 1991-92, if I remember correctly, I might be actually missing a year or two, Professor Shirin Muswi wrote on these documents as well as the nikahnamas of Muslim merchants of Gujarat, as well as certain legal documents dealing with the marriage and divorce among the Gujarati Banya community. Both our works revealed how the concept of, for example, meher gained prevalence even amongst the non-Muslim Banya community of Gujarat. Our researchers also showed how during the medieval period, the nikahnama, unlike today, listed the rights of the women and in what conditions she could demand divorce. And who can forget Professor Farhat Hassan's remarkable books based on such legal documents from Gujarat. In fact, he has also contributed a lot to similar type of research. I would also like to point out two other aspects which I am reminded of before we start taking up a few questions. For example, number one, that it is from such documents as you are using, or for that matter, the Surat documents, Cambay documents, which I used, that it becomes clear that the term Shariat did not only mean Islamic law, but also civil law. For example, there are a set of documents from Cambay where there is a case discussed where a Hindu woman who had converted to Islam, she wanted the share from her father's property, who was a bania merchant. But the family, as you yourself pointed out in your lecture, they refused to give her anything because she had converted. She appealed to the Qazi. The matter came up in the Qazi's court. The Qazi, in fact, did not give any decision, but he, asked that the Sahibe Shara should be appointed. Those who know Shariat should be given the task to find out what is the law. The term Sahibe Shara is there. And as a result of this, a number of Pandits were asked to work on this, and the decision which they gave was that as she had converted, the Hindu law says, the Shara says, in fact, what the document says is, according to the Shara, once the woman has converted from Hinduism to Islam, she is not supposed to have a property of her own. The second example which I would like to give before you is something which was not discussed today, but I would want the audience to know about it, is that regarding the appointment of wakils, in the sense of advocates, lawyers, counsels, which, if you are reading only the official histories, you would not find any mention of them. But from the archival sources, from these documents, for example, from Surat documents, there is a document from Gujarat dated 1621, which for the first time mentions an advocate, a wakil, as an advocate who had been appointed to argue a case. And by 1629, the services of the wakil, as a counsel, as a lawyer, who was also preparing the legal decrees in the court of the Qazis, appears to have been well established, because we start getting document after document regarding how the wakils were helping in the preparing of the legal decrees in the court of the Qazi. From another source of there is a diary of Etmad Ali Khan in Persian, and we at Aligarh we have a transcript of that. The original is in British Library. We come to know that these wakils, just like today's wakils, could also argue cases on behalf of clients who were totally unrelated to them. They were actually paid for the job which they were doing. So what I'm trying to say is, supporting your point of view and saying that sometimes, very new type of information is gleaned from the archival sources. And that is why the type of study which you are carrying on with is very, very important. And I think that it would be, I hope that there are other scholars who would take up such similar works. In the last, before we start taking up questions, but just one last point. In two of your documents, you showed alamate daskhat, those symbols which represent the signature of the witnesses. I wish that in your future researches, you would throw some more light on that. Chandrasekhar ji, while introducing you, had talked about one of my chapters in the book, which deals with Mason's marks. So while I was doing that chapter, I went through a large number of legal documents from where I started getting certain information. For example, in Cambridge documents, wherever a Johari is signing the document, the symbol alamat daskat, which is given along with his name, is the symbol of a flower. And the flower of one jeweler is different from the flower of the other jeweler. Similarly, I also found that when a khema doz, a tent maker, is signing the document, a hibanama, along with his signature, his name, a scissors is being drawn, which shows his profession. For that matter, the banya merchants, when they are signing, each banya merchant along with his name has a swastika, and each swastika is different from the swastika drawn against the name of the other banya. I think that is one of the aspects on which much more work is needed, and these archival materials are the only source from where we can get such type of information. Thank you very much, Nandini ji, for this brilliant talk, and I would request Rana Pa that if there are any other questions, please, if there are certain questions, please do ask them, put them up so that Nandini can give her answers.
Thank you so much, Professor Rizavi. We have many questions actually. And one thing is very clear, the more we know, the less we know. So there is so much of scope for all scholars, and I hope there are some young people here. I can see for the profile photographs of some who look young, and I hope you are going to take forward the work that is being done. So but there's one question by Vipin Krishna. He is asking, do you find Turkish dating systems and legal concepts in these documents? And do you think this has any bearing on the Persianate world at large?
Yes, we find the duodenary year, which you can identify. It's like the Farasil, the Taviskanil. It's really very, very distinctive. In the collections that I've seen, not just this collection, they seem to crop up only in documents to do with taxes and tax agreements. So it will be something like Fasle Kharif Taviskan Il as Ibtidai Fasle Kharif Taviskan Il Ta something something, and it comes up. They actually cause huge dating problems unless there are other calendars present, because as you know, it's a 12-year cycle. So how on earth will you know when it is? But usually it is combined with something, either a Hijri or a Fasli or a Samvat calendar. I don't think there is any legal concept as such. I mean, a lot of people ask me whether there is a Mongol Yasa concept like anywhere. I think that is more to do with dynastic rules. And it really, I cannot see any particular connection with Turkish laws here. But the calendar certainly exists as a convention.
Nandini, there's a question by Aditi Kanchan, which I can see on my screen. Does the story of Muhammad Asad reflect upon the legal rights and claims available in the patrilineal system of family? Was this instance of disinheriting based more on the factor of religious conversion, or was it due to the lineage being traced to a courtesan?
Wonderful question, and this is exactly what we have wondered. Persian, this kind of sanads of like court decisions or mahzars or of decisions, in fact, are not particularly different even from English legal decisions. So judges don't often give their legal reasoning. They give you the facts, they give you the claims, and they give you the decision. They don't say always, because of this, because of that, we have come to expect that because of the very prolix judgments we get nowadays in Indian High Court, Supreme Court, etc. But what very often in these documents, they give no reasoning. They just say that this claim has been made, this is what we have done, these are the processes, and this is the decision. So it seems to me that you could take it either way. But what is perfectly clear that the local community, and by which I mean, and they actually list up who it is. So they call all the qazis from all the districts. They call them muhtasib, I think from Ujjain. I can't remember exactly, but we can see on that document. They have muftis coming. So it's a huge number of people actually put the mohar on the original document. And they say that all Hindus and Muslims, by which they must mean the eminent learned people, etc., they all agreed that Muhammad Asad has no claim. Unfortunately, they do not tell us because he is ill-born or born of a luli or because his father has converted. They don't say anything like that. But they give you a picture of this man, Muhammad Asad, trying again and again, because he didn't just try once. He actually even went to Farooq Shia's court. It does say that as well. He tries to bring like various officials, etc., etc. It keeps carrying on, but we don't know the answer. But I would guess that it's a combination of both. Clearly, there are many other documents in the collection. Actually, we have a document in which Suraj Bhan is old and poor, and he comes begging to the Faujdar of Mandu, saying that I have nowhere to live, my family has kicked me out. And the Faujdar of Mandu arranges a house for him. So you can already see that the family had basically kicked them out. So it's a combination, I suppose, of both of these things.
Right. I mean, that is something which I also pointed out. I mean, in my Surat documents, it's a woman who has converted, but she's denied the right, and the Qazi agrees with that. And Qazi says that this is as per the Shara, the legal practice of that particular community, that they should not be given a share in the property if you have converted. But contrary to your evidence and what I cited, there are a large number of these documents from Vrindavan, which Irfan Habib Saab has seen, and he has yet to write on that aspect. I mean, he has written one article on that. Now I am told that he's going to do a full book on that. There are a large number of cases where there are intermixing of families, same family having Hindus and Muslims, and a large number of them. But possibly, if I remember correctly, what he said was that this problem of denying of rights is not appearing in those documents at all. But let us see what he actually ultimately ends up with. But what I am trying to say is that possibly the religion did make some difference, but in the Mathura, Vrindavan region, where it became a popular thing for conversions to take place to a large degree amongst the community of peasants, possibly that situation did not arise. There is a question, Ranapa, which I see from Somak Roy. Nandini, it's to you. Thank you for a fascinating lecture. What I wish to ask is regarding the documentary practices of these households. They were different from the colonial archives. So do you see a pattern in terms of categorization and storage, or let's say an underlying logic of classifying / keeping the documents?
Yes, completely. So in fact, one American legal scholar pointed out to me when I was trying to do the same method on another collection, and that collection was mainly parvanas of various grants. Okay, it's particularly lucky that we have so many different kinds of documents. But in many cases, you just have series of documents which are these grant documents, the high-level orders. So this American legal scholar said to me, I don't think you can think of these as archives. You should think of them as reliquaries. Like in a museum, they're sacralized and fetishized. So people only keep those high-value things which point out their rights. And by rights, we also have this other thing, which is that the family constantly trims itself. You're right, Professor Rizavi, that there must be variations in terms of the family's tolerance levels of what they see as deviation, and that might be regionally and temporally specific. But whatever it is, the family, the lineage, obviously it grows, but they want to only share the rights with some people. And there is a clear sense that there must be other documents that are only keeping the rights. documents related to the rights of the central family. And so another senior professor asked me, but how do you know the limit of the archive? I mean, the answer is we don't, because people are constantly destroying documents as well, in order that other rights don't come to the fore. So my answer is that the logic is the lineage's rights. That's how it's told.
Right. Ranapa, are there any other questions?
No, I don't think there are any other questions.
Before you give it to somebody else, I'll just point one more thing, Nandini, if time is permitting me to. That just like your family documents, which you so beautifully pointed out to us, there is a Persian, published book, Sharaif-e-Usmani, which is a collection of Persian documents, including farmans belonging to a family of Qazis of Bilgiram. I mean, at a time when I was doing my PhD, Irfan Saab suggested me this book, and I thought, what am I going to do by reading a book which has been published only in 1905 or so? But once I started reading it, it was nothing but a collection of various type of documents. And I'm really very thankful to you that you have brought out your collection before us. And I would ask people who know Persian that please pay attention to Sharaif-e-Usmani as well, because it also has a mine of information hidden within those documents. For example, I came to know that during the period of Shah Jahan, one Bilgirami nobleman was passing through his own area when he came to know that there was a particular scholar of good standing delivering a lecture in a madrasa. So he decided to go and attend that, lecture of this scholar whose name at the moment I'm forgetting. But then this document writes that when this particular nobleman went to the madrasa, sat to listen to the sermon, this lecture, he said, I couldn't understand a word because the entire lecture was being delivered in Hindavi, not in Persian. So such type of gems are hidden within such sources of information which otherwise we don't find. Sorry for taking so much of your time. Ranapa, go ahead.
It's been a very insightful lecture and summing up by you, and I would like to thank both of you for that. I now invite Mr. Shahid Mehndi, the president of the Memorial Society, to give his valuable comments.
He has to unmute.
Shahid Mahbub, can you hear us?
Let me call him up.
Just call him. He may.
He's there in the.
So anybody else would like to ask questions till we. Before I invite Professor Ahan to give a vote of thanks.
No, Professor Ahan is not here. He's at a place where internet connection is not there.
Achha, he had left. He had joined. Okay, he had left now.
Can I mention one more thing?
Yes, please.
On the basis of the documents and as well as the stories, there are many stories on the Qazis, especially the Qazis of Jaunpur. And one story goes through the donkey of the Jaunpur became a Qazi. These stories really worth reading.
कि मामू आपको अपना अनम्यूट करना पड़ेगा, आपका टाइम आ गया है बोलने का.
So these stories also show what was the mockery of the system.
मैंने भी यहाँ से कोशिश की तो हुआ नहीं.
So I will miss in first attempt of reading, one see that these are just hilarious aspects, but these are also having some hilarious information on the system of judiciary of that time. And as second is about the archival system of earlier Samarkand and Tashkent. That is also one aspect one should look at. They have a very good archival system here, right from the 13th, 14th century, and later on, the documents are available from 15th, 16th century. And on the Qazi system, they have a lot of documents which are available in their.
I hope you can hear my voice now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Please.
First of all, I would like to thank Professor Nandini Chatterjee for a very fascinating subject. And we were trained to go to the sources, but you have gone in depth. The documents on which these sources are based. And to draw from this micro picture, a larger macro picture, I think that is the challenge for rewriting or reinterpreting the histories of these regions and these times. As Professor Nadeem Razavi also mentioned certain sources which are still to be mined, I must say. But the basic thing is that how do we piece together these things into a larger picture, larger interpretation of those times, which is very much required from different angles, especially when very callous efforts are being made to rewrite the history in these times. Anyhow, I thank very much, and it was quite a sort of, I'm out of touch, although I did my history from Aligarh, but it's a long time ago. But one thing we were told in those days also, and I think it is relevant, and I think Aligarh School of History is still adhering to those principles, that go to the source. And Professor Chatterjee, I congratulate you that you not only went to the source as defined, but you mined further those basic things on which those sources should be based. So thank you very much. And I was very much benefited from the remarks of Professor Nadeem Razavi, I think, who is carrying the best traditions of Aligarh School of Medieval History. So I thank you very much, and it was quite a privilege to be a part of this exercise and to be able to listen to these things. I'm suggesting that these lectures which are being held, they should not just be lost in time, and they should be printed as soon as possible. Or we should get the script and put it on the website, you see, so that those who are interested in revisiting these lectures are able to do that. Thank you very much, Professor Nandini. Thank you very much, Professor Nadeem Razavi, for very enlightened remarks, very informative remarks. And thanks, Professor Mukhia, who has been very quiet. I don't know why, you see. But of course, he is the doyen of Mughal history. In fact, I was just again revisiting his book, Mughals, you see, which is. So, and thanks, Suhail, and Javed for keeping this memory of Amir Bhai on and on and on. And thanks, Rana, for conducting the seminar. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. I would once again like to, on behalf of the Professor Amir Hassan Abidi Memorial Society, I would like to thank Professor Nandini Chatterjee, Professor Nadeem Razavi for giving this wonderful lecture, very insightful, and for chairing the session. And I would like to thank Dr. Muhammad Ali Rabbani for having graced the occasion, and Mr. Shahid Mehndi for for attending, and all the members, and Professor Eaton for taking out time from your busy schedule, and Professor Mukhia, who has I think left us. And every one of you who has come today, thank you very much. This lecture will be put up on the website and it will be available on YouTube. You can read it there. And I think Mr. Suhail Abdi does put up a transcript of the lecture on the website. And once Professor Chatterjee shares it with him, it will also be put up.
Professor Eaton was also there.
Professor Eaton is here and he's also thanking everybody. So thank you once again. And with this, I bid everybody good night and hope to have another wonderful session next year.
Thank you so much, friends and teachers.
Thank you very much. Bye.